Tonight on Primetime Politics, a question of leadership.
Last time I checked, Pierre Poilievre never came out in our election.
Pierre Poilievre's failure to win the election and failure to build bridges even with Conservative premiers is putting his leadership in a negative light. So can Pierre Poilievre survive?
4 consecutive losses to the Liberal Party. I think it's time for them to do some soul searching.
Coming up, we'll speak to Conservative MP Scott Aitchison to get his point of view. Also, Heather McPherson is one of just 7 New Democrats who won re-election. What does that mean for the future of the NDP? We'll ask. And how will Mark Carney govern without the majority he wanted? This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, Pierre Poilievre's leadership of the Conservative Party was under the microscope today, failing to win the election after leading in the polls for all of 2024 and failing to win his own riding on Monday night. 2 Conservative premiers were asked about Pierre Poilievre today, and it is clear there's no love there.
Last time I checked, Pierre Poilievre never came out in our election. Matter of fact, him or one of his lieutenants told every one of his members, don't you dare go out and help the PCs. Isn't that ironic?
Why is there so much bad blood between you and the federal party? And how does the federal party start to build bridges now within the Conservative movement as they look to the next 3, 4 years?
Well, all they have to do is make a phone call. I like a lot of the MPs, but the people spoke. And they spoke loud and clear. They spoke loud and clear in our election, and they spoke loud and clear on the federal election. And so that's democracy. They elect who they want.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us.
And it was a similar sentiment from the Nova Scotia Premier today, Tim Houston, confirming tensions between he and Pierre Poilievre, something the Globe and Mail reported on last week.
I didn't have a relationship with him. I don't have a relationship with him. Obviously, during our campaign, there was a situation. I think the Globe story was pretty accurate. Is that something that happened there that kind of probably had ramifications on both sides. I think that after 4 consecutive losses to the Liberal Party, I think it's time for them to do some soul searching, and I hope they do.
Well, Scott Aitchison is the Conservative MP for the Ontario riding of Parry Sound, Muskoka, a riding he's held since 2019. He won again this Monday evening, winning by 52% of the vote. Scott, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Listen, obviously your party did not win, but right now there are questions around leadership. And I think part of that has to do with poll numbers, because your party didn't win, but it did do well through most of this campaign when it came to the polls. But Pierre Poilievre did not. In fact, he underperformed in popular support when compared to the Conservative Party itself. Is he the problem here for the party?
No, of course he's not the problem. In fact, Pierre Poilievre has helped us achieve a much larger caucus than we've had. And in the last couple of elections, we've grown another 24 members of our caucus, and frankly, we've grown those caucus members. We've won seats which I think have traditionally been seen as NDP seats, and so Pierre's done an amazing job of connecting with working folks, union members. I think he's done an incredible job of animating and engaging a younger generation of Canadians who've come out to vote. I think he's done an amazing job of doing those things, and he's grown our broader voter coalition. And I think that in many ways that work is just beginning.
Except that, people have known Pierre Poilievre since he was first elected. So he's been around for many, many years, even before he was leader. Has that brand essentially took the party as far as it can go, though? Because even himself, Pierre Poilievre, did not win his own seat.
Well, I think it's safe to say that Pierre has won a seat that has traditionally been seen as a Liberal seat. Those suburban Ottawa ridings, he first won it when he was 25 years old, and he demonstrated to the country and to our party that if you work hard, if you knock on every door, and if you commit to the riding, you can win, and people will believe in Conservatives. Now, he's done that for the rest of the country. And I think that, I think he's not just engaged a new voter coalition, but he's engaged an awful lot of candidates who saw what he did and want to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, although, and forgive me for saying this, we've heard a couple of high-profile Conservatives today alone, Pierre Poilievre of Nova Scotia being one of them, and he basically says that under the Conservative Party under Pierre Poilievre's leadership is not a big enough tent for all Conservatives. The fact that he's not made every Conservative feel welcome. What's your response to that?
Well, it's safe to say that a Conservative in Nova Scotia is maybe a little different than a Conservative in Alberta versus a Conservative in Ontario. I think our tent is a broad coalition, and I think that I've always said that this is a relationship business, this business of public life. There's probably some work to do amongst us all to connect and build those relationships, and I'm happy to be a part of that process, and I know that my colleagues are too.
Do you think you can be a bridge between Mr. Poilievre and Premier Ford, though, for example? Because, Premier Ford also came out today saying that Pierre Poilievre prevented federal Conservatives from helping PCs out in the last provincial election.
I would never presume to take on such a role, but I know that Pierre is a gifted and capable individual, and I think he can bring all Conservatives together at a national level. There's, as I said, there's obviously a bit of work to do amongst our coalition across the country. I know Pierre can do that work, and he will do that work.
What's happening here, though? Here you have two very popular Conservatives in Premier Ford and Premier Houston. Why has there been such a problem to build a bridge between them and Pierre Poilievre?
I don't know. I don't know if there's been a problem to build that bridge. I know that Pierre has been singularly focused on the national scene and very focused. I've never seen anyone work harder. I've never seen anyone more focused and so laser, focused on the mission before him and making sure that we make life more affordable for all Canadians. And so, I think that, he's focused on the message. He's focused on his national role. We will spend some time working with our provincial friends, and if there's some risks to heal, we will do what we got to do that.
Mm-hmm. And is that going to be in front of people to see, or you think that's a backdoor conversation to be had amongst Conservatives?
Well, I would imagine there'd be a lot of conversations amongst friends and colleagues that aren't in front of microphones, and that's probably the best place for those conversations to happen.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's also some practical questions right now. As I said, Pierre Poilievre did not win his own seat. Do you know of any elected Conservative who might give up their seat so that Mr. Poilievre might be able to run in a by-election?
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't think there's a mad rush to find such a thing. I think that Pierre has earned the right to take a moment and reflect on sort of what he needs to do next. I think we need to meet as a caucus, and we will, I'm sure, do that shortly. But any speculation about that at this point, I think, is a little premature and not necessary. Pierre has a minute to think about what his next step is.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, you are returning to the House of Commons as an MP. I'm wondering what your hopes are for this Commons. It's a minority Liberal government up against some very big threats with Donald Trump, an existential threat against the Canadian economy. What do you hope you see amongst MPs of Conservative, Liberal, otherwise? What type of environment do you hope comes out in this next Parliament?
Well, I would echo the words of Pierre, in fact, on election night, when he talked about, working together as a parliament, and as a country, when it comes to addressing the threats from our American friends. I think that, we need to be united when it comes to dealing with tariff threats and this business of our, threatening our sovereignty. And I think that our parliament will do that. We'll do that very business. I think as well that, there will be areas where we agree, areas where we disagree, and effective official opposition opposes when necessary, proposes ideas where necessary, and I think that it can be a functioning parliament. Now, of course, it's a Liberal government, so I'm disappointed in that. So I'd like to see a Conservative government as soon as possible, but we have immediate business to get to, and we will get to it.
Okay, Scott Aitchison, always appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
Thanks, Michael.
Well, it's just not Conservatives who are thinking about the way forward. New Democrats also asking themselves some tough questions right now, both about their party and with a new parliament ahead. Only 7 New Democrats won re-election Monday night, down from 25 when Parliament was dissolved back in March. Heather McPherson is one of those 7 re-elected in the riding of Edmonton Strathcona. She joins us now. Heather, thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Listen, I know this must be a difficult time, losing as many colleagues as you did, but when you think about the New Democrats who did not win re-election or those who did not even get elected, what do you think Canadians have lost out on?
Yeah, you know, Canada needs a new Democratic Party. It's vital for our democracy. You know, I've spoken to so many people across the country. We don't want a two-party style electoral system like we see in the United States. We've seen how that's not good for Americans. That wouldn't be good for Canadians. It pushes people to the outside, to the extremes. We need to have a democracy where there are multiple voices. There are, you know, more than just 2 big parties that are fighting it out. And New Democrats play that important role. So, you know, we have 7 New Democrats going back to Ottawa. I wish there were more, but those 7 of us are going to be working very, very hard to make sure that not only are we holding the government accountable, not only are we making sure the Liberals fulfill the promises they made to Canada, but that there are more New Democrats at the table next time around.
But, you know, New Democrats have steadily been losing ground since the Orange Wave back in 2011. But provincially, in the West in particular, the NDP remains a strong force. Does your party at the federal level need to do things differently, perhaps learn from your provincial colleagues?
You know, I think when I think about what New Democrats do achieve in the House of Commons, you know, you speak about having 25 in the House of Commons in the last Parliament. Well, those 25 did more than every single one of the Conservatives combined. You know, we were able to work with the government to get dental care put in place, the pharmacare program, anti-scab legislation, 10 days of sick leave. Like, all of these major impacts for Canadians' lives happened because New Democrats were there. And yeah, there were only 25 of us. And there are only going to be 7 in this next Parliament. But what we're able to achieve because we are New Democrats, because we are fighting for Canadians, I think is really important.
Now, the Liberals are once again in a minority position. You mentioned about the things that your party was able to do with just 25 last time around. Would you be willing to enter another supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals this time around? Because that would essentially give them majority vote to get things passed.
Listen, we will work with the Liberals if they are doing things for Canadians. Obviously, there has been no discussions with the Liberals, and we are not doing that right now. If they stop doing things for Canadians, they will lose New Democrat support. That's an easy one. That is what we have said all along. When they are delivering for Canadians, they can count on New Democrats to be fighting alongside them. When they start fighting for the ultra wealthy, you know, I'm worried about our Prime Minister and his perhaps inability to understand what everyday Canadians are going through. When he stops fighting for regular Canadians, he'll find a foe on the New Democratic side.
A foe, but are you worried about any floor crossing? Again, the Liberals only need 3 votes to secure a majority. No. Are you? No, and so you would not cross the floor yourself.
Not in a million years. I am a very, very, very proud New Democrat.
Now, you have been one of the most high-profile New Democrats since being elected in 2019. You handily won in your own riding with nearly 47% of the vote this time around. Is it time for you to take that accomplishment to the next level? Will you run to replace Jagmeet Singh as leader?
You know, we've got not even 48 hours since the election was called, and we are having lots of discussions right now with our caucus members, with folks that weren't able to get reelected, with the party. There's lots of conversations happening right now, and that's not one of them. You know, we've got to figure out what the next few weeks looks like, the next few months looks like. There'll be time for those conversations, but right now I'm focused on making sure that the 7 New Democrats that go back to Ottawa are ready to fight for Canadians.
So what does that mean then, Heather? Because, you know, now that Jagmeet Singh says he's going to step aside once you choose an interim leader, that is one step that you're going to have to accomplish. Also, yeah. I was seeing that Don Davies is looking at a way to try to get your party official party status because you fall short of the 12 seats needed right now. Yeah. Where are those discussions right now?
Well, for me, I'm trying to figure out exactly how all of those pieces play because, like I said, it's just after the election. A really hard fought election as well. So right now we're having conversations. We're talking. All of us that are returning to Ottawa are talking about how we strategize because there are only going to be 7 of us. So we need to be more strategic. We need to be thinking of how we pool our resources, how we use the tools that we have. We've all got phenomenal teams behind us, and let's figure out how to use those teams together, and let's figure out how to make sure that we're being as effective as we possibly can in Ottawa, because Canadians need New Democrats, and we need to be there fighting for everyday Canadians.
Mm-hmm. Give us a bit of a glimpse, if you will, in the choice for an interim leader, because again, that's going to be up to the remaining members of caucus. You're now, of course, one of the 7 remaining members of caucus. Mm-hmm. Will you be headed to Ottawa then to come together and figure out who the interim leader is going to be? Walk us through that process.
Yeah, so for us right now, we're going to have a conversation. We have a caucus meeting set up, so we are going to be doing it on Zoom because we are from all across the country. So we'll have a conversation, talk about some of the choices that we have, look at some of the options, figure out what that looks like going forward, and hopefully in the next few days we'll have more news for you.
Okay, so the next few days. So by next week, you think you'll have made that choice then?
I certainly wouldn't want to mislead anyone. We will get there as fast as we can, but it's a tricky process, and there's lots of conversations happening.
Okay. Listen, Heather, I always appreciate the time. Congratulations on your win, and I know it's a bit bittersweet given what's happened to the party and the caucus overall, but thank you very much for the time this evening.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Nice to see you again, Michael.
And you. Well, to the Canada-U.S. relationship now, as we did hear from Donald Trump this afternoon, commenting on the Canadian election and adding a face-to-face meeting between he and the Prime Minister is just days away.
Well, I think we're going to have a great relationship. He called me up yesterday. He said, let's make a deal. He was running for office. They both hated Trump. And it was the one that hated Trump, I think, the least that won. I actually think the Conservative hated me much more than the so-called liberal. He's a pretty liberal guy. But no, I spoke to him yesterday. Couldn't have been nicer. And I congratulated him. It was a very mixed signal because it's almost even, which makes it very complicated for the country. It's a pretty tight race. But he's a very nice gentleman, and he's going to come to the White House very shortly, within the next week or less.
Now, you heard Trump describe the election as being close, and it was, when you look at the popular vote, less than 2.5% separating the Liberals and the Conservatives. The end, of course, being a minority Liberal government, not the majority that Mark Carney was looking for. So how will that affect his ability to govern? Well, Eddie Goldenberg was Prime Minister Jean Chretien's Chief of Staff, nowadays Senior Advisor for Global Public Affairs. Eddie, thanks for dropping by.
Delighted to be here.
So listen, I'm going to begin with Mark Carney because, I know Liberals say the outcome is much better than what was predicted even as recently as last December. But at the end of the day, he was looking for a stronger mandate. He did not get that. In what area did the campaign fail, do you think?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I think he got a very strong mandate. I mean, he has 179 seats. The 7 NDP members, 169, I'm sorry, the 7 NDP members have no intention of wanting an election for years to come. So as far as I'm concerned, to all intents and purposes, he has a majority government. Where did the campaign fail? I think if you look where the Liberal Party was a couple of months ago, what he did is a tremendous success. Could he have got more seats? Maybe. Could he have got less seats? Definitely. With 169 and 7 members of the NDP who are going to who almost lost their seats or is going to sit as independents, I think Mr. Carney's in a very strong position.
But it would have been better off for him if that majority was a true majority, not relying on the New Democrats. Is that not true?
Well, it's hypothetical. He has what he has.
He has what he has. So there was no area do you think he could have done better in this campaign?
Well, I mean, look, I think he ran a very good campaign. Did he lose some seats that he would have liked to have won? Probably. But I got to tell you, if you compare him to Mr. Poilievre, I think Mr. Carney is in a very, very strong position today. And I think he's in a very strong position. I think he has a very good mandate, clear mandate, seats in every province. He is a man of policy. He's got a lot of experience in the private sector, a lot of experience in the public sector. He's going to have a very difficult time given the geopolitical situation and the international economic situation, but it won't be because of his lack of 3 more seats that he'll have a difficult time.
Okay, so talk to us about what this means then, because again, he does not have a majority of his own. He does have to rely on other parties. How does that affect his priorities of building faster, investing into defense, trying to get pipelines built across the country?
I don't think it affects those priorities at all. I think he's elected, and he will try to do the best he can do. You talk about building pipelines across the country. As far as I'm concerned, it's the economics of the pipeline that are going to determine whether they're pipelines, not the House of Commons.
How so?
How so? We can all be in favor of a pipeline, but you have to be able to finance it. You have to have buyers. You have to understand the construction costs. The Trans Mountain cost over $30 billion. If you wanted to go west to east, Trans Mountain was about 1,200 kilometers. It's about 4 times longer. So, I'm not convinced the economics are there for oil pipelines. Okay, perhaps one to the west coast from Alberta. I think the really interesting national project will be a trans-Canadian electricity grid. I think that makes a lot of sense. I suspect that it's better economics, but I'm not sure. But, let's understand, you don't build these huge projects if the economics aren't there.
I'm wondering, as you say that, what type of outreach the Prime Minister should be doing, though, to, for example, the Conservative Party right now? Because they might have things that they can work in common. Is that outreach important for the Prime Minister to make?
I think an outreach to parties on the other side of the aisle is very important to make. I think there are a lot of areas where all parties are, by and large, in agreement. And I don't like the polarization in the United States, and I think that we have Prime Minister Carney has an opportunity to dampen down that type of polarization in Canada by talking to the other parties. But there has to be a willingness on the other parties to engage as well. And I'm sure there are a lot of areas that they can work in common. I'm sure that the committees in the House of Commons will be one place where parties can come together and work in common. They won't agree on everything. There will be areas where there is fundamental disagreement, and that's normal in a democracy. But yes, outreach is important. I saw on the news last night that the Prime Minister already started that yesterday.
Mm-hmm. I also want to talk about where the Liberals go from here, because the average lifespan of a minority parliament is about 18 months to 2 years. And I know you think that this one may last longer because of the realities the other parties face, but still, there will be another election. And when you look at the coalition that was built here by the Liberals to deliver government to them, they relied on voters who would normally vote NDP, voters who in the past voted Bloc Québécois, driven on by Donald Trump. But going forward, that does not seem like a coalition that may exist in a few years' time, and certainly not one that a party can rely on to deliver government. What does the Liberal Party need to do between now and the next election to create a coalition beyond the one that delivered them government this time around?
Well, I guess the first thing I'd say is that who knows what the life of a minority parliament is. This is a very, very strong minority. The last parliament, which was a minority parliament, lasted almost 4 years. So it's not likely that a year and a half is the appropriate lifespan of a parliament. I think in elections, people vote in part on the record. I think what the government has to do, it has to govern well. If it governs well, it'll go to the people 4 years from now or 3 years from now, based on its record and based on what it would want to do going forward. I don't think he has to worry too much about who once voted NDP or who once voted Bloc or who once voted Conservative or who once voted Liberal, because there'll be a lot of water under the bridge between now and the next election. And people, in a democracy, people will choose at that time based on who they think is best suited to govern for the further 4 years. So I think in my experience with Prime Minister Chretien is that the better you govern, the more likely you are to be reelected.
So what are the markers then? If it's the better you govern, what markers do you think this government needs to be aware of to have that type of conclusion?
Well, I think I think there are a couple. The first one is how to deal with the Americans, and how to work with countries around the world who have the same issue, how to deal with the Americans. And so they're going to be judged to a certain extent on that. They won't have wonderful announcements, but they may be able to prevent the worst from happening. I think Prime Minister has said that you got to plan for the worst and hope for better. And I think they'll plan for the worst. I think the second thing, we have a remarkable opportunity at this time to get rid of, or at least lower, interprovincial barriers to trade. And I think he'll be judged on his ability to do that. And his ability to do that will be dependent a little bit on how well he can work with the provincial premiers and how well the provincial premiers are prepared to make sacrifices. So I think they'll be judged on that. He'll obviously be judged on the economy, as all governments are. He has a program to try to build more houses. Hopefully that'll be successful, although I think one thing he has to take into consideration is whether the workers are actually, there are enough construction workers out there to actually build all of those houses. But he'll be judged on the economy, on level of prices, level of employment, productivity, and he's going to have to make some decisions that are really important economically, for which the payback can be more than 4 years. I think there are a lot, for example, the Europeans are trying to attract talent from the United States. Researchers in the United States, scientists who have lost their grants or don't feel comfortable working with the Trump administration. And I hope the Carney administration will do the same thing in Canada. And I think that would be a terrific accomplishment.
Eddie Goldenberg, always appreciate the time. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And that is our program for this Wednesday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow evening. Until then, take care.